Information technology is the one that's going to have the biggest impact in the next decade because we have so much data that we have to handle and we miss things because we're collecting data, we file the data, we don't necessarily turn that data into information and connect the dots, do something with it. And that's where I think technology will really start to play a role.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, VP of Marketing at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to another episode of Food Tech Talk. On today's episode, we're delighted to welcome Sara Mortimore. Sara is a globally recognized leader in food safety and quality with a career spanning leadership roles at Walmart, Land O'Lakes, and General Mills. As the former vice president of global food safety and compliance at Walmart, she's been instrumental in shaping food safety policies at one of the world's largest retailers. With a deep passion for ensuring safe and high-quality food for consumers, Sara has driven change through innovation, compliance, and strategic leadership. Her expertise in regulatory affairs, product safety, and industry-wide collaboration make her a key voice in advancing food safety standards today. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you today. Just looking at your vast, history in the industry with a career like yours, I'm curious kind of what got you started in the industry and, maybe what are some of the key turning points in your career that have been really instrumental in where you are today?
I was thinking about this, having stepped back from a corporate role, and I'd like to say that I was completely inspired to follow a food safety path right out of school. But actually, I wasn't. That came a lot later. And I think that's true for many young people today. You don't know what to do, don't know what's out there. So I come from a large sort of a history of gardening people, farming people. That's my family and that's my background. And I went to agricultural school and studied food science. I started work in product development and got really interested in food safety by design in a couple of jobs. And that really got me started on thinking about food safety. So it's not always that you're out of the gate, passionate advocate for food safety. Sometimes it just grows and it nurtures in you something that actually never goes away, becomes a vocation, if you will. And I think that's what many of us in food safety recognize, that it's a vocation for us, and you don't actually retire ever. I think you just continue to work in the fields because we love what we do. We're lucky enough to work for so many good companies and with so many great people. So I've been inspired by many others along the way. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of listeners will recognize you from your time at Walmart. And I'd love to hear, about that and kind of like, I know there was so much that you did while you were there. And so maybe you can share a little bit more about some of the experiences and, that you've had leading in that capacity.
Yeah, I think, when I went to Walmart, I sort of thinking, well, what can I contribute? I followed Frank Giannis. I thought, what can I do? But Frank's very wise at times, I think, and he saw that I was different to him. It's always good, I think, if you hand the baton on to someone who will then bring something fresh to it, as I've done now with Liz Duffy stepping into the role at Walmart behind me. But with Walmart, I was really surprised at how authentic a company it is, how passionately people within that organization care about the customer, always putting the customer first. And it's real. It's really authentic. I got to work with some amazing leaders, some amazing people who were very supportive. And I thought, well, in my tenure here, let's see what we can do. And I got to work with someone who I really respected when I joined. And we decided we were going to put in a new food safety management system as a framework. And that was a good vehicle, really, to leverage all of the skills in the global team around all of Walmart. And I learned in working in a global organization, I learned this in General Mills too, good isn't necessarily at the headquarters. Best practice isn't necessarily sitting there at the headquarters. It's in all the people around the organization. And at Walmart, we had some really strong programs in Mexico, in Japan, in Canada, in the UK, Central America, in all of the markets, actually. And so we looked to see who was doing what really well and who could therefore lead the development of a food safety management system and a program that all others would adopt around the globe. And that did two things, really. It gave people in the markets an opportunity to lead globally. It also gave people in the markets an opportunity to learn from each other. So we brought people really together to share that know-how and capture it, document it, capture it in a food safety management system that I hope will be a good legacy for me to have left behind and for others to build and shape. And, it will grow, I hope. I hope it just doesn't stay static on the shelf, that it does continue to evolve and improve. But it was really fun because we got to work together on building something. And when you work in a global organization, you really do need to listen to people out in the markets and understand what they're dealing with, what the regulatory environment's like, what the customers are like, what the retail operations are like. It's different. It's not the same everywhere. So you need to listen and leverage the skills that you have at your disposal. I certainly didn't know all the answers. That's for sure.
Looking to improve your supply chain? At Trustwell, we've been connecting the dots between the food industry and data for over 40 years to give you more control and visibility across the full supply chain. Our comprehensive Food Logic platform and our new Genesis Foods set a new standard for compliance, transparency, and quality across the food industry. Request a demo today. The link is in the show notes or visit us at trustwell.com. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up, the global piece of it, because I think that's really key. So, what were some, challenges that you faced, having such a global footprint and being able to apply a lot of these types of standards and food safety across the board?
It's much improved by the use of technology. We had the pandemic during my tenure at Walmart, so we were all sat in front of Zoom screens like we are now. But it was also a great leveler. Everybody was on a screen. It wasn't that those of us at headquarters had the advantage because we all worked together. We saw each other every day. Everybody was kind of in the same boat. So I think that in some ways helped us get focused on what we needed to do. But also, I was able to get out into the markets quite early on. I'm so thankful for having done that because I got to see what talent we had in the many operations that Walmart had at the time. And so, I knew we had good people, we had good leaders, we had great talent out there, and that we could work together to create something special, I hope, that is a legacy. You might know that Walmart was awarded the Black Pearl by the International Association for Food Protection. I am so proud of getting that award. We got it in just before I left, actually. We shipped it all off. And I thought, well, it's a bit scrappy, but that's kind of like Walmart too. It wasn't as polished maybe as it could have been if we continued to refine it, but it was very authentic. And that is how we were at Walmart, how they are at Walmart. Very authentic, very real. What was in that application was exactly what we were doing. Not perfect, but it really told a story, and the story of where we'd been, where we were today, and where we were going as a global team. So it was a team effort. And I think that's how I've liked to work in a global situation, really understand what talent we have, how to leverage that, and how to work collaboratively as a group, and enjoy working with each other. We also had loads of fun. I will say that the leaders in Walmart and all of the food safety team in Walmart, great sense of humor. And so we enjoyed working together as well.
Yeah, I love that. And you keep coming back to this word of authenticity. And, I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, and I feel like that is really the key to having a strong culture, company culture, food safety culture. And I know that was really important at Walmart as well. So, how are you able to kind of take that quality of being authentic and put that into the culture and to ensure food safety at the same time?
I mean, it's not always easy. And I've worked in 3 very large organizations. I've been very fortunate to have those experiences. And I've typically stayed a long time in all of them. General Mills, when I came over to the USA as General Mills acquired Pillsbury, and I was with Pillsbury, and it was really an interesting culture merger, if you will, because Pillsbury was very heavily into food safety, microbiological food safety, had high-risk foodstuffs, and we knew a lot about environmental management, product testing, HACCP. That was at our core. General Mills products were lower risk, I'd say, in food safety. They were dry products, cereal type products. So you had these 2 quite different mindsets of perhaps one who is stronger maybe on toxicological issues and one who is very strong on microbiological. And of course, when you put 2 organizations together, the resulting culture is different for both. It's not that Pillsbury was wiped out and became General Mills. It was that the 2 organizations became one. And I know that General Mills today is way stronger from a food safety and culture perspective than it was at the start of that acquisition. General Mills is very much made up of homegrown culture, homegrown talent. So you see a lot of people who've worked together for a long time. They know each other. They know ways of working. They've grown up together. When I went from General Mills to Land O'Lakes, very different culture. And I'd say cooperative. And maybe because Land O'Lakes is a co-op, you saw that cooperation, that cooperative spirit there. And it was very easy to be authentic and open. I remember one moment, a defining moment for me actually in my career. I met with the CEO. I'd been there a year. And he said, "How's it all going?" And I said, "Yeah, good. I'm really happy to be here." And he said, "Oh, we're in great shape, aren't we?" And I thought, well, I could say, great, absolutely great. And we've got just a few things we need to do here and there. We've got a plan. And I thought, but on the other hand, I think we've got a lot of work to do, actually, to really modernize and really build us up to where we could be. And I had a choice at that point. And I decided to say, you know what, we've got a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do to get to where I think we need to be. And we had a fantastic conversation. And it was one of those defining moments in your career that if you'd gone the other way, it would have been entirely different. But I had a brilliant time because I had support from the CEO, all of his executive leadership team, all of the functions, because we talked a lot about what we were doing, why we were doing it. And we really built up some quite aging dairies at the time. It's been around 100+ years, Land O'Lakes, and into really strong food safety programs. I'm sure they're continuing to build them. You're never done in food safety. But I was really happy with what we managed to achieve there as a group, again, by being open, honest, collaborative about what the need was. And so those were good times as well. So I've been very lucky, I think, to work with people who were open to that kind of discussion, and it went okay. It went okay for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's, helpful, especially for people that are kind of in that space in their careers where they're trying to decide, do I say this or do I just say it's fine, or whatever. And so, yeah, no, that's an awesome story that you shared.
Sometimes it helps also, I'll just add this, to bring in other people, because you can say, this is what I think, but let's hear what other people think too. And does that support what I'm saying? And that also can be very helpful. We did that when I was at Land O'Lakes. We brought in a few really good experts to really validate, I think, what we were seeing internally. So that also helps a lot if you're in the middle of your career and not sure where to go with it. Don't be afraid to do that.
Oh, that's great advice. So from your perspective, what do you feel like is really the biggest gap in food safety today?
Oh, sometimes I feel quite in despair. I look around and I think, are we any better than we were 30 years ago? And, you look at the data, we're not bending the curve. You look at the data in the USA, you look at the data in Europe, and we're not seeing numbers of foodborne illness go down. And so you've got to think about, why is that? I've been thinking about that quite a lot recently, and I think there's a couple of things going on. We don't seem to have the knowledge that we need today in the right place. I don't know whether we're equipping people for the jobs that they need to do. As I look at HACCP plans in organizations, HACCP is a great tool. I've worked in it for many, many years, but we're not really using it as we should be using it. A lot of HACCP programs are legacy today. They were built 10, 20 years ago. People just go in, they think, okay, I own that. I'd better update it and add to it, tweak it. It's already certified by some of the GFSI schemes, benchmark schemes. So it must be okay. And they don't really challenge that. So don't know whether we've got people who are equipped with the skills and knowledge to really go deep, look behind the curtain, if you will, go deeper. So that's one thing. I don't know whether the verification systems we've got today is helping, to be honest. I've been on the GFSI steering co for quite a few years, and we were working hard to look at what was next, how to push up the standards, race to the top. I don't think we're there yet. And I worry that being certified somehow is contributing to the complacency that we see in the industry as well. I think many of the events we see are preventable. We just have to get in there and look and complete a hazard analysis and risk assessment to see what else we can do. Never be satisfied. Never be satisfied. That relentless search for how we can improve what we're doing today. And there's so many sources of information available to us now that weren't around 20, 30 years ago. You had to carry a big textbook around with you to look things up. And now it's just, and you've got the information you need. It's amazing. So we should be better, but we are not yet doing better than we are. We're not bending that curve. So there are some gaps. So education and verification are the two things that I've started to be looking at and thinking about.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, I also like to kind of look at, okay, so how does regulatory compliance, come into play when we talk about these things happening? And just recently, we saw the announcement from the FDA that, FSMA 204 is going to be delayed another 30 months. What are your thoughts on that? And what can companies do to be proactive and, also obviously regulatory compliant, but really be proactive in these matters?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I go back to the Walmart developing a food safety management system that had to work globally. So we were operating in multiple countries, actually same in General Mills global management system, food safety management system, but you have multiple regulations in these countries. So how do you do that? We updated our policy to say that we were driven by food safety science and doing what was necessary for food safety and meeting all regulatory expectations. That was the and. And really thinking about what was necessary for food safety helps a lot. Regulations offer a great framework, but what's necessary? I really like the FSMA approach, actually, the way that it's risk-based. It requires hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls. However, not everyone is equipped to do the hazard analysis and determine the risk-based preventive controls. So that's a kind of dilemma that we have in the industry. A more prescriptive framework, maybe like the traceability rule 204, with very much specifying which foods were included in the scope of that, which were not. Maybe more of that will be necessary over time. Maybe there'll be more of these vertical regulations to support. But you also can look to non-government organizations like Codex Alimentarius, which have fantastic set of standards, which has been developed by multiple governments. Over 40 countries, I think, contribute to those standards. And then many of them do, of course, go into resulting country legislation, but that takes time. So companies, organizations need to be proactive and really look at what does the science say? What does the risk assessment say? What are the hazards? As I said before, dig deep. don't wait for the regulator to tell you what to do, because that takes time. It took 10 years to update the codex, almost 10 years, the codex, HACCP and hygiene principles. Regulations don't move very fast. We now have another 30 months to implement the traceability rule. It's 2.5 years. It's a long time extra. I know a lot of people were saying it's too short a time to implement, but this is a long time extra to have. I hope companies will continue with their plans and just get started on it and know that they can try it, see how it works, refine it without maybe having the regulatory enforcement to contend with at the same time. But keep going, do what you need to do. Putting the consumer first always, I think, pays dividends. What can we do to prevent foodborne illness? Yeah, we can do more. We don't need the regulator to tell us that.
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing that, that the consumer is demanding this. And it reminds me of what we saw from Walmart of saying all foods, not just what's on the FTL. And so I think that's taking a stand in the right direction. And maybe you can share a little bit more about that, because I definitely feel like that's in the best interest of the consumer.
But it's also, in some ways, operationally easier for the retailer in some ways, because you've got to segregate which foods are included, which foods are not. But what Walmart was doing is also saying that we're prioritizing. So we make sure we have to have the ones that are on the FTL list, but we want everything to be included. And there are other retailers that were doing the same. Kroger, I think, came out with that same mandate. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Even the FTL list is somewhat tricky, because you've got to think about, okay, I've got peanut butter on there. Is that going through a kill step, a pathogen reduction step? Is it peanut butter in a cookie? Is it in a filling that doesn't get a kill step, or is it in the cookie itself that does get a kill step? How is all that going to work? And what's the water activity in that component? Is it going to be effective? Or what kind of log reduction are we going to get? So it becomes about the risk assessment anyway. I think it's almost easier to say, let's make sure we can trace everything. And then back within the supply chain, the distribution centers, the stores themselves, if you've got the same approach, I think it ultimately will benefit the consumer, but it should be easier to have one approach to how we handle goods in the supply chain. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a moment ago, you had also mentioned technology and innovation. So, what technology are you seeing right now, or innovations in the industry that you're very excited for? And kind of where do you see that going in the future, maybe 5-10 years down the road?
Well, there's so much happening in technology, isn't there? I get excited by basic process technology, well, not basic, but things that are new that will help us in the industry to reduce, certainly on the pathogen side. So I was listening to a webinar recently on cold plasma, and I thought this looks really promising. It's been around for a while. People are continuing to work with it, but things like cold plasma, ozone, high pressure processing was a good innovation. But more and more, I think it's the information technology that's going to have an impact, and diagnostics, rapid testing and everything. That's always going to be helpful too in root cause analysis. But information technology, I think, is probably the one that's going to have the biggest impact in the next decade, because we have so much data that we have to handle, and we miss things because we're collecting data, we file the data, we don't necessarily turn that data into information and connect the dots, do something with it. And that's where I think technology will really start to play a role. People are still worried about artificial intelligence. There's nervousness when you go to industry meetings. But I was listening to an AFTO webinar, I think just last week, with Creme Global out of Ireland. And I got really excited about that, seeing how accessible it's becoming. And if that's here in 2025, think what that'll be like in 2035. I think it'll be a massive game changer. We'll still have new process technologies, new diagnostic capabilities. And I think it's the information technology and artificial intelligence that's going to be the game changer for us. And it'll be really interesting, as I sat and talked about, I'm sitting here talking about the fact that we don't necessarily have the knowledge and skills to do a decent hazard analysis. how could we augment those skills that we have today with artificial intelligence? We have to be careful, but could it actually plug a gap that there is today and bring a more uniform approach to the industry? Maybe. I'm really, really curious to see where we go with this, but I think that's going to be the game changer in the next decade. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just, when you start to look at the possibilities, it's kind of limitless, right? And there's so much that we can, like to your point, augment. And it's like we have the human element and all of these things. And then how can we take that to the next level and use AI to the best of our ability? And it's huge.
Yeah. And I'm not a tech person, not really. I'm much more of a, food safety management systems people person. And I'm excited about what we can do with it. So if I'm excited about that, I'm sure, it's really going to go places when the people that really understand this better than I do start to leverage and understand and trust more. But we just have so much information coming at us. I think that's one of the challenges too. When you're working in a food production plant and people work so hard, the food safety teams, the quality teams, they're so dedicated, they're so hardworking, but they have so much information coming at them more than ever before. I would say from when I was a quality manager in a production facility, you did have books, you did look things up. People sent you stuff in the mail, your customers sent up, and you collected data, you did your tests and you collected your data and you might put it on a SPC chart perhaps. But now we've got so much coming at us, whether you subscribe to information feeds, it's just limitless. So on one hand, that's really great. On the other hand, now we have to deal with it all. And when you're busy and managing the day-to-day, that can be hard. So I think we need to augment with these sorts of technology and tools. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. And, kind of organizing the data too, because there's just so much. And so, yeah, absolutely agree. It's kind of a two-edged sword there with the data. Something that you mentioned was, kind of when we were talking about the gaps was, the skills that are really needed. And so, from your perspective, really, what are those critical skills that, food safety quality professionals need to really start to harness now to be able to keep up with all of these changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, of course, a baseline is you need to have food science, microbiology, whatever the technical area is. So you've got to have that base of technical scientific background, I would say. But on top of that, we really need probably four things. I would say you need to be curious. You really need to be curious and ask lots and lots of questions. No, not just sit back and take information, but really be curious and question things. Secondly, critical thinking. You need to be able to connect the dots, think about that information, process, synthesize, and really think about what that means for your facility, for your retail setup, for your organization, for your regulatory environment, whatever field you're in. What does that mean? So curiosity, critical thinking, but also then the people skills. So thirdly, probably being able to communicate, have communication skills, because we've all seen very technical, brilliant scientists who can't turn that into something that's intelligible for the normal people in the room. And you need that also to get people, inspired and motivated to follow, whether that's your senior executive team or the lowest level in your operation, but you need to be able to communicate with at a level that they understand. And then perhaps fourthly, you have to have collaboration skills, the ability to collaborate and work with others, because food safety is a team sport. There's no room for egos and protecting what you have. We really need to share and discuss and collaborate to move the needle forward. That's why industry meetings are so important. That's why talking to each other is so important, discussing and really kind of thinking about what's next. And together is how we're going to make a change. So those four things: critical thinking, collaboration, curiosity and the ability to communicate. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice. So how can we work together to improve food safety worldwide? And I mean, you've mentioned obviously those are the things that we need, but how do we connect with others? How do we get to that point where we can communicate and actually make an impact?
I have no magic. I have no crystal ball or magic, magic for that. So I've been thinking about it because it's so important. Certainly getting out there, continuing to talk. We need safe havens for those discussions as well. I think sometimes that's difficult when you're in a antitrust, environment and you're talking with so-called competitors, but we do make it happen. Certainly there are a number of really good forums like the Global Food Safety Initiative. I think their conference might even be next week, but those sorts of environments are really good. The International Association for Food Protection, fantastic organization where people come together from regulatory, academia, industry, and talk to each other. But then, of course, you go away and do your own thing again, don't you, after these great meetings when you're all fired up. So it's really thinking about how can we have that groundswell of people who really want to work together and want to make change, and what does that look like? We have WHO, FAO working together through Codex Alimentarius, and that's a great forum. But if you ask me whether I'm disappointed about anything in the industry right now, it's probably that we need to shine a light on some of those organizations that are there, that have really fantastic materials, and not enough people look to that and utilize those as a starting point, whether it's in writing a specification or writing a regulation, because those are written collaboratively and across nations and by some of the best brains in the industry. So, there are forums. It's just that it's so far doesn't seem to be enough to make change. So probably need to keep thinking about that.
Yeah. Keep talking and coming together. I think that you're absolutely right. So, we talked about the future kind of way out, but what do you feel like is really your, food industry prediction for 2025 for this year? What do you see on the horizon in the next 9 months?
I think we've touched on it already. I think probably the technology piece, artificial intelligence, etc. It's moving so fast. Regulation moves slowly, other changes similarly slowly, but that's going really fast, the technology piece, and it's becoming so much more accessible. So I think perhaps by the end of 2025, we might see more acceptance, greater understanding of what AI, robotic process and automation, all of these kind of tools and technologies can do for us in the industry. So my prediction is that will be gaining momentum in terms of acceptance and understanding of what we can do, how we can leverage that to process Internet of Things. All of those areas, I think, will be something. Maybe, of course, I think we'll continue to see. Yeah, I'd like to see this, a continued focus on toxicological hazards. The US FDA shone the light on some of the heavy metals, PFAS, some of those chemical contaminants, and continue to test. That was another announcement, I think, that FDA made today or this week already around continuing to focus on infant formula and looking at chemical hazards, heavy metals in particular. That's a good area. Some countries, I think, may be a little bit ahead in terms of regulating some of the limits, but it's overdue. The chemical contaminant focus, that's another one that I think, this year could be another one where we continue to see that gain traction and awareness of what that means and how we can control through the supply chain. It's not easy. It's not easy to do a hazard analysis on the toxicological side because we don't have many toxicologists at our disposal in industry. We have way more microbiologists than chemical contaminant experts, but that's an area that needs a light shone on it, continue to do that. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on with that one. So just a couple more questions for you. So obviously, you have this long career what would you want to be remembered for? And kind of, what is your legacy in the industry?
I hope people see me as somebody that had a go, that really had a go and didn't sort of think, why me? Well, I can't do that. And I go back to when I wrote my first Hassett book with my former colleague, Carol Wallace. We were pretty young to write a book on Hassett, to be honest. It didn't stop us thinking that it was a great idea to do that. We just had a go. And we did that because we saw that there was a gap in the industry. There wasn't the knowledge and there were no resources. So someone had to do something about it. And Carol, by that time, had moved to a retailer in the UK. I was still with Pillsbury, Diageo. And we thought, well, why not? Let's give it a go. And we'd just been working on updating the Pillsbury program, working with our colleagues here in the USA. And so we thought we'd do it. And we're now writing our 4th edition. So I hope I'll be remembered as somebody who, gave it all she had. I never would have dreamt I'd end up at Walmart, me. And I think I said that to Frank Yanis. He called me up and said, I'm going to FDA. I'll put your name down on the list of people who should be considered. I said, me? Walmart. Okay, I'll give it a go and see what I can do. So I hope I'd be remembered as somebody that just gave it all she had and tried to do the best she could and hopefully got some good results and inspired some people along the way. I certainly made a lot of great friends in this industry and hopefully they took something from me as I did from them.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that as my my inspiration for today to give it a go. I love that.
Yeah, see what you got. See what you've got.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've talked about a lot of stuff here. Anything that we haven't really touched on that you wanted to share or anything I forgot to ask you?
I don't think so. I mean, we've really talked about quite a few far-ranging areas, haven't we? I've been faced with so many challenges over the course of my career, recalls, crises, and you think, have those defined me? No, we just got on with it in many ways. But I think, I've learned with every failure, I've learned something. With every opportunity, I've learned something. And for me, it's all about keeping learning, keeping asking those questions, whether you're in a crisis and having a horrible, horrible time of it at the moment, or whether you're not in a crisis, but you're watching somebody else go through one and recall, what can you learn from them? So always be curious, always ask those questions, get good at asking questions and you really use that to go through your career and you'll be successful, I think. I hope so. I hope we see many more people like me and greater than me in the future.
So where can people follow you or where are you speaking next? How can people keep up with you?
I will be at the Food Safety Summit in Chicago in May. That's my next public speaking role. We're running a workshop actually on hazard analysis at the start of that event. So I will be there. I will also be at IAFP in July. So I'll be at a few things in the industry and here on webinars and things like that too.
Awesome. Well, we will follow you and make sure we check out all of those speaking engagements. Thank you so much, Sara. This has been just so great to speak to a legend on so many topics and really appreciate you coming onto the podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. It's been really good fun to think about the answers to some of these questions. So thanks.
Of course. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of Food Tech Talk. Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Trustwell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.